Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to look at the Armenians' new unique unit at the fortified church, the Warrior Priest, which is a novel blend of an infantry and a monk into a single unit. We're going to look at what it is, what upgrades affect it. Is it a good infantry with a bit of monkness thrown in? Is it a monk that can fight back a bit in a pinch? Or do neither of those descriptions really fit? We'll look at the infantry and monk component in a bit of depth separately. So to start with, let's see if it's a good infantry unit, focusing only on its combat potential. Beginning with its cost, compared to other infantry, its 30 food and 60 gold puts it in the same ballpark as the swordsman line, with a bit of emphasis on gold, maybe most directly comparable to an eagle warrior. Especially when you factor in supplies for the swordsman line, it's pretty clearly the most expensive here, though it's comparable in total resources to many infantry unique units, including berserks, samurai, kamyuk, sergeants, world raiders, and others, with again that extra monk-like emphasis on gold. It's upgraded with all of the infantry techs at the blacksmith and barracks of course, though keep in mind it's sort of a monk here as well, benefiting from sanctity for plus 15 HP and fervor for plus 15% speed at the fortified church. While it starts off a bit slower than regular infantry to offset this, after squires and fervor it ends up being a little on the faster end, at least compared to the regular swordsman line. Of course, that comes with a cost, with those monk techs adding 315 gold to its upgrades in Castle Age, but considering you're getting more HP and faster units than a longsword benchmark, it's not a bad result. In fact, compared to not just swordsmen, but to other similar costing unique units that require castles, they stand out in Castle Age both in terms of HP and attack, while roughly matching many of them in speed. Now there are a couple of hidden disadvantages to mention though. First, there's the cost of the 200 wood fortified churches to build them. They take 30 seconds to train, which is a little longer than most infantry, though it makes sense given all the Bible studies they'll have to add to their regular military training. They're a little slower by default, as mentioned. They have lower line of sight than many infantry, again probably because of all that reading, and they also take both infantry and anti-monk bonus damage. That means the Eagle and Scout lines are getting pretty substantial bonuses, while unlike most infantry, the Warrior Priest doesn't have an attack bonus against buildings or eagles in return. In fact, they don't deal any bonus damage at all, so it's one of those rare cases in Age of Empires where what you see is what you get. So now let's put this all together and test how they actually stack up in Castle Age, giving a snapshot in a few common fights. Starting simply against a longsword, they win one-on-one, assuming you have all your upgrades, and it's not even really that close. Right away, this is clearly an above average infantry, though that was probably obvious just from their stats already. Even with balanced resources though, 8 against 11, they beat longswords, again assuming everyone has every Castle Age upgrade available. Take away those Castle Age upgrades though, like Sanctity for the plus 15 HP, and longswords can take that fight. So if it sounds like I keep emphasizing they need all their upgrades, this shows why, and is part of the starting up cost it takes to get them to that really above average point. Of course, Armenians are fairly unique for having access to Champion in Castle Age, so that may be a more fitting comparison in this particular case. And it turns out, again with all upgrades, Warrior Priests win that fight one-on-one, albeit with just one hit left. Given how expensive the champion is to tech into though, this is really saying something. And the immediate question here is why would anyone then make champions as Armenians? We'll get back to that question, but this matchup in particular really reminds me of the Condottiero for Italians, where you have an Imperial unit that bypasses the usual champion line's upgrades for an immediate power spike, which I don't think is a terrible comparison, where again the Warrior Priest can act as a faster transition that only really needs Sanctity to keep up. To give a few other examples, they do just fine against knights, getting surprisingly close to beating a knight with bloodlines if you have Sanctity, and still do better than a longsword even without that tech. They even hold up well against crossbows, and with Sanctity take as many arrows as a Castle Age champion with gambesons. Even if you skip Sanctity, they still take as many arrows as a longsword with gambesons, and you can make them move faster than swordsmen as well by adding in fervor. So in both melee and against ranged units, they're just looking like possibly your best infantry option in Castle Age, while being made at the fortified church. In fact, so far they almost seem to make the sword line obsolete, but already in the back of your mind, there should be a problem here. We haven't really seen their counters yet, which are of course units with bonus damage against monks. One dramatic example is against Eagle Warriors, where they actually lose one-on-one, and given this is a specialty of the longsword line, the difference really couldn't be more stark. I will point out though, they're not that far behind beating the Eagle one-on-one, and remember their cost is also quite similar. This makes me wonder if maybe down the road we see warrior priests get negative monk armor, just to help eagles not trade roughly 1-for-1, but to be a clear counter. Light cavalry also trade decently thanks to their +10 bonus damage, and again for them can win that matchup, whereas usually they lose to swordsmen. It's not the most dramatic victory again, but is clearly a case where the warrior priest is worse than the longsword. Overall, they're looking pretty good in Castle Age though, and now let's take a quick look at Imperial and see if anything changes. First off, they don't have an elite upgrade per se, but of course can be improved at the blacksmith, and also have a unique tech at the castle that increases their HP by 30, effectively working as the warrior priest's elite upgrade. I should note this also affects the champion line as well though, giving them 100 HP instead of the usual 70. Both clearly have a lot of durability, but notice the warrior priest is trading some attack for its higher HP. Head to head, those things almost exactly balance out, so in melee at least, you're getting something comparable in strength to an Armenian champion. Obviously both are much better than a generic champion as well, though given the Armenian champion's cheaper individual cost, by Imperial Age I think the golden window of the warrior priest is kind of over at this point, and the champion is giving something similar per population, but more cost effective in the long run. Notably, both are also quite similar against ranged units, taking 25 shots each if the Armenian champion has gambizins and the unique tech. They just look like they perform quite similar in both melee and against ranged units if we use these tests as a benchmark, though again the champion is cheaper. Of course, the main thing about champions is to think about how they're really used, which is primarily either against eagle warriors, which is obviously not a role you want the warrior priest anywhere near thanks to the bonus damage being flipped. The other main role for champions is as a general anti-trash unit, so let's just quickly check how the warrior priest compares and if it keeps up or is truly outpaced. First off, against skirmishers, with gambizins the Armenian champion takes almost 60% more arrows, so this is clearly 1 point in the corner of the champion in this role. Second, against halberdiers, both are pretty similar, being able to roughly take on 3 at once. The warrior priest does come out looking a little better though, so maybe 1 point goes in their corner for this round. The deal breaker though is against hussars, where a champion wins with roughly half its HP, while the warrior monk takes 12 bonus damage per attack and cannot trade 1-for-1. Considering an 80 food unit here is taking out a 60 gold unit, I really don't like this trade in a vacuum. Put together, it feels like the warrior priest was almost better across the board in Castle Age compared to the swordsman line, or even early champions in Castle Age given the expensive upgrade cost. But by Imperial Age, the Armenian champion starts to look like a straight-up better combat unit, though with the warrior priest still doing an adequate job as a general infantry. This sounds like a reasonable trade-off. However, this is all just looking at its combat ability, and there's a whole other side to this unit. So now let's switch to comparing it to the monk. Right away, it has a massive advantage of being created in 30 seconds compared to 51 seconds. Combine that with its noticeably faster base speed, plus the fact it's affected by squires, and you just have a much faster unit in every sense. Being a monk has an advantage offsetting its extra bonus damage it takes as well, as it turns out enemy monks will need atonement to convert them, which is an extra step and clearly an edge over generic infantry. Adding to this, warrior monks are also able to heal, which starts out similar to the rate of a monk, but is doubled by their unique tech that also gave them 30 HP, ending up healing 240 HP per minute. The way it works is if there's an enemy nearby they prefer to fight, but will automatically heal during a pause in the fighting and have the same 4-tile healing range as a monk. Maybe the strongest aspect of the unit we haven't even mentioned yet though, which is how good they are at collecting relics. Remember, they're created 70% faster than a monk, move 21% faster even without upgrades, and are able to fight off a bit of enemy resistance they encounter while grabbing them. Throw in the Armenians' free relic with their first fortified church as a civ bonus, and you're almost guaranteed at least 4 relics to your opponent's 2 or fewer if you make it your early Castle Age focus. At the moment, they can't even be stopped by scouts in early Castle Age, as even with not just bloodlines but +1 attack and armor, scouts still lose to an unupgraded warrior priest. Obviously, a group of scouts would work, but resistance to being picked off by a scout or the odd spearman is a huge advantage for the warrior priest when it comes to collecting relics before enemy monks. Even without infantry's usual bonus damage against buildings, the relatively high melee attack can also help them contribute some of the siege roll in a monk in siege push, or use their good combat stats to support a castle drop, with their healing ability contributing nicely to either role as well. This also has to be thought of in the context of Armenians having fortified churches, getting free passive arrows with each relic garrisoned, and giving warrior priests a building to jump inside to heal when under any kind of threat. My impression after all of this is simply this is a very strong unique unit, any way you use it. In Castle Age, other than a few monk counters, the warrior priest performs similar to an Armenian champion, with a much lower upfront upgrade investment, even if it does cost more per unit. You'll also be almost uncontested with relics as well. Plus, they can heal each other or your other units, making them good to use even in small numbers with most army compositions. Even if Armenian champions eventually outpace them in the general anti-trash and certainly the anti-eagle role of infantry, warrior monks become even better at healing with their unique tech. So I think they still have a huge role to play in the Armenian late game as well. Those are just my early impressions though, and I'm curious to hear your guys' experience with it, whether it be on Arena or any other map. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.